The Spanish Tragedy, or Hieronymo is Mad Again, is an Elizabethan tragedy written by Thomas Kyd between 1582 and 1592. Highly popular and influential in its time, the Spanish tragedy established a new genre in English theatre, the revenge play or revenge tragedy. The play contains several violent murders and includes as one of its characters a personification of revenge. The Spanish tragedy is often considered to be the first mature Elizabethan drama, a claim disputed with Christopher Marlowe's Tamburlaine, and was parodied by many Elizabethan and Jacobean playwrights, including Marlowe, William Shakespeare and Ben Jonson. The Elizabethan era is the epoch in the Tudor period of the history of England during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I 1558–1603. Historians often depict it as the Golden Age in English history. The symbol of Britannia, a female personification of Great Britain, was first used in 1572, and often thereafter, to mark the Elizabethan age as a renaissance that inspired national pride through classical ideals, international expansion, and naval triumph over Spain. Tragedy, from the Greek, tragoidia, is a genre of drama based on human suffering and, mainly, the terrible or sorrowful events that befall a main character. Traditionally, the intention of tragedy is to invoke an accompanying catharsis, or a pain that awakens pleasure, for the audience. While many cultures have developed forms that provoke this paradoxical response, the term tragedy often refers to a specific tradition of drama that has played a unique and important role historically in the self-definition of Western civilization. That tradition has been multiple and discontinuous, yet the term has often been used to invoke a powerful effect of cultural identity and historical continuity. The Greeks and the Elizabethans, in one cultural form, Hellenes and Christians, in a common activity, as Raymond Williams puts it. The revenge tragedy, or revenge play, is a dramatic genre in which the protagonist seeks revenge for an imagined or actual injury. The term revenge tragedy was first introduced in 1900 by A. H. Thorndike to label a class of plays written in the late Elizabethan and early Jacobean eras, circa 1580s to 1620s. Thomas Kyd, baptized the 6th of November 1558, buried the 15th of August 1594, was an English playwright, the author of the Spanish tragedy, and one of the most important figures in the development of Elizabethan drama. Although well known in his own time, Kyd fell into obscurity until 1773 when Thomas Hawkins, an early editor of the Spanish tragedy, discovered that Kyd was named as its author by Thomas Heywood in his Apology for Actors 1612. 100 years later, scholars in Germany and England began to shed light on his life and work, including the controversial finding that he may have been the author of a Hamlet play predating Shakespeare's, which is now known as the Hamlet. Summary. Before the play begins, the Viceroy of Portugal rebelled against Spanish rule. A battle took place in which the Portuguese were defeated and their leader, the Viceroy's son Balthazar, killed the Spanish officer Andrea before being taken captive by the Spanish. Andrea's ghost and the personification revenge itself are present on stage throughout the entirety of the play and serve as chorus. At the end of each act, Andrea bemoans the series of injustices that have taken place, and then revenge reassures him that those deserving will get their comeuppance. The ghost of Andrea and revenge open the play in Act 1 and close the play in Act 5 with descriptions of the classical underworld. There is also a subplot concerning the enmity of two Portuguese noblemen, one of whom attempts to convince the viceroy that his rival has murdered the missing Balthazar. The king's nephew Lorenzo and Andrea's best friend Horatio dispute over who captured Balthazar. Though it is made clear early on that Horatio defeated Balthazar and Lorenzo has essentially cheated his way into taking partial credit, the king leaves Balthazar in Lorenzo's charge and splits the spoils of the victory between the two. Horatio comforts Lorenzo's sister, Belle Imperia, who was in love with Andrea against her family's wishes. Despite her former feelings for Andrea, Belle Imperia soon falls for Horatio. She confesses that her love for Horatio is motivated partially by her desire for revenge. Belle Imperia intends to torment Balthazar, who killed her former lover Andrea. Meanwhile, Balthazar is falling in love with Belle Imperia. The Spanish king decides that a marriage between Balthazar and Belle Imperia would be an excellent way to repair the peace with Portugal. Horatio's father, the Marshal Hieronymo, stages an entertainment for the Portuguese ambassador. Lorenzo, suspecting that Belle Imperia has found a new lover, bribes her servant Pedringano and discovers that Horatio is the man. He persuades Balthazar to help him murder Horatio during an assignation with Belle Imperia. Hieronymo and his wife Isabella find the body of their son hanged and stabbed, and Isabella is driven mad. Revisions made to the original play supplement the scene with Hieronymo briefly losing his wits as well. Lorenzo locks Belle Imperia away, but she succeeds in sending Hieronymo a letter, written in her own blood, informing him that Lorenzo and Balthazar were Horatio's murderers. Hieronymo's questions and attempts to see Belle Imperia convince Lorenzo that he knows something. Afraid that Balthazar's servant Cerberine has revealed the truth, Lorenzo convinces Pedringano to murder Cerberine, then arranges for Pedringano's arrest in the hopes of silencing him too. Hieronymo, appointed judge, sentences Pedringano to death. Pedringano expects Lorenzo to procure his pardon, and Lorenzo, having written a fake letter of pardon, lets him believe this right up until the hangman drops Pedringano to his death. Lorenzo manages to prevent Hieronymo from seeking justice by convincing the king that Horatio is alive and well. Furthermore, Lorenzo does not allow Hieronymo to see the king, claiming that he is too busy. This, combined with his wife Isabella's suicide, pushes Hieronymo past his limit. He rants incoherently and digs at the ground with his dagger. Lorenzo goes on to tell his uncle, the king, that Hieronymo's odd behavior is due to his inability to deal with his son Horatio's newfound wealth, Balthazar's ransom from the Portuguese viceroy, and he has gone mad with jealousy. Regaining his senses, Hieronymo, along with Belle Imperia, feigns reconciliation with the murderers, and asks them to join him in putting on a play, Solomon and Percetta, to entertain the court. When the play is performed, Hieronymo uses real daggers instead of crop daggers, so that Lorenzo and Balthazar are stabbed to death in front of the king, viceroy, and Duke Lorenzo and Belle Imperia's father. He cast the play in such a way that both himself and Belle Imperia could exact their own revenge by actually killing the murderers. Belle Imperia chooses to stab herself during the play too, although this was not Hieronymo's intention for her. Hieronymo tells everyone of the motive behind the murders, bites out his own tongue to prevent himself from talking under torture, and kills the Duke of Castile and then himself. Andrea and Revenge are satisfied, and promise to deliver suitable eternal punishments to the guilty parties. Revenge. The morality of revenge has been a source of discourse for years, and as revenge is one of the key themes of the play, a lot of debate has been made over it. 30. Hieronymo's pursuit for revenge and subsequent scheme is open to moral-based judgment, but the question many scholars face is whether the responsibility and fault of Hieronymo's desire for revenge belongs solely to him. In one theory, Stephen Justice proposes that the fault lies not in Hieronymo, but rather in the society at the time. It is argued that Kyd used the revenge tragedy to give body to popular images of Catholic Spain. Kyd tries to make Spain the villain in that he shows how the Spanish court gives Hieronymo no acceptable choice. The court turns Hieronymo to revenge in pursuit of justice, when in reality it is quite different. Clarification needed. Some critics claim that Hieronymo's attitude is what Central Christian tradition calls the old law, the biblical notion of an eye for an eye. Hieronymo's passion for justice in society is revealed when he says, "For blood with blood shall, while I sit as judge, be satisfied, and the law discharged, ie.vi.35-36. Murder and death. The nature of murder and death, performed and as natural phenomena, is also questioned. Smith considers how the decade in which the play is set, is relevant to its mentionings of hangings, murders, and near deaths throughout. 31 multiple characters are killed or nearly killed throughout the play. Horatio is hanged, Pedringano is hanged, Alexandro is nearly burned at the stake, and Villipo is assumed tortured and hanged. Kyd consistently refers to mutilation, torture, and death, beginning early in the play when the ghost of Don Andrea describes his stay in the underworld, and murderers groan with never-killing wounds, and perjured whites scalded in boiling lead, and all foul sins with torments overwhelmed, I.68-70. He vividly describes in these lines as well as others the frequency of murder and torture in the underworld. Murder and death make up the tragedy theme that holds true through the last scene of the play. Murder and death. The nature of murder and death, performed and as natural phenomena, is also questioned. Smith considers how the decade in which the play is set, is relevant to its mentionings of hangings, murders, and near deaths throughout. 31 multiple characters are killed or nearly killed throughout the play. Horatio is hanged, Pedringano is hanged, Alexandro is nearly burned at the stake, and Vilippo is assumed tortured and hanged. Kyd consistently refers to mutilation, torture, and death, beginning early in the play when the ghost of Don Andrea describes his stay in the underworld, and murderers groan with never-killing wounds, and perjured whites scalded in boiling lead, and all foul sins with torments overwhelmed, I.68-70. He vividly describes in these lines as well as others the frequency of murder and torture in the underworld. Murder and death make up the tragedy theme that holds true through the last scene of the play. Social mobility. Edit. Another theme is social mobility. Characters such as Lorenzo and Pedringano are driven by their ambition and desire for more power. Pedringano especially so, as he is a servant, belonging in the lowest rank of the hierarchy. His efforts to curry favor and go beyond his place with Lorenzo leads to his resulting downfall, as he is barred from social mobility, a mere tool in the end. In addition to that, Hieronymo and his family are labeled as a middling sort by many scholars. Essentially the middle class. Kyd establishes a situation in which conflict between Hieronymo's household and the nobility is inevitable, as the middle class is seen as a threat, one that is pressing up on the aristocrats. This is evident in scenes such as the resulting competition from the middling sort, Horatio and Lorenzo, the king's nephew. Scholars cite oeconomia as the philosophy Kyd is adhering to in the play. The structure in essence is a play within a play. The play begins with a background of why Hieronymo wants to seek revenge. He is seen as a minor character and eventually becomes the protagonist to add to the revenge plot. When he becomes the main character, the plot begins to unfold and become the revenge story that it is. Kyd incorporates the build-up to the revenge as a way to show the internal and external struggles of the characters. The actual revenge takes place during the play that Hieronymo stages, making this the climax of the play. The resolution is the explanation to the king of what has happened. The play within the play is not described until the actual play is performed, intensifying the climax, and the resolution is short due to the explanations that have already occurred. Critics say that the Spanish tragedy resembles a Senecan tragedy. The separation of acts, the emphasized bloody climax, and the revenge itself, make this play resemble some of the most famous ancient plays. Kyd does acknowledge his relations to Senecan tragedies by using Latin directly in the play, but also causes Christianity to conflict with pagan ideals. We also see Kyd's use of Seneca through his referencing 3 Senecan plays in the Spanish tragedy. It is said that this play was the initiator of the style for many Elizabethan revenge tragedies, most notably Hamlet.